All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Lauren Williams. I'm Adult and Community Services Manager for the Columbia Public Library. Welcome to today's Lunch and Learn. This program is co-hosted by the library and the League of Women Voters of Columbia, Boone County. Today, we'll be learning about a very important initiative for our community, United Way's Equity Challenge. Before I turn things over to the League to introduce our speakers, I have a couple of Zoom housekeeping items, which should be pretty familiar to all of us by now. If you'd like to ask questions of our presenters today, and this will be interactive, we'll be using the chat feature of Zoom. So if you hover over your Zoom window with your mouse, you should see that chat icon that looks like a speech bubble and the other tools at the bottom of your screen if you're on a computer. If you're on a tablet or a phone or something like that, you may have to tap in the middle of your screen to see those tools. And typically there's a more menu or three dots that you can choose to find that chat icon. We are recording today's presentation, so it will be available in the next couple of days on both the League's YouTube channel and the library's YouTube channel for future viewing. And now I'd like to welcome the League of Women Voters board member, Barbara Hoppe. Barbara, you're muted. Barbara, you're muted.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Lauren. We're always pleased to have Lunch and Learn and partner with the Columbia Public Library. We're very happy that today's program is on the Equity Challenge, which is presented by the Heart of Missouri United Way, which will help us gain awareness and understanding of racism and learn how to build a community in which people's outcomes in their lives are not determined by their skin color. And we have two guest speakers today, Latoya Stevens and Rachel Delco. Latoya is the marketing and communications director of Heart of Missouri United Way. She's self-taught in traditional and digital marketing, communications, and graphic design. She also has earned 2 Bachelor of Science degrees, one in criminal justice and the other in paralegal studies. She was raised in a military family, has lived many places, and has lived for the last 10 years in Columbia, Missouri. Rachel is a native of St. Louis, Missouri, and currently serves as the director of community impact of the Heart of Missouri United Way. And throughout her career, she has focused on diversity, inclusion, and equity. She earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in religious studies at Webster University. And then she went on to get a Master of Social Work from the Brown School of Social Work at Washington University in St. Louis, and specialized or individualized in strategies for effective nonprofit leadership. So with that introduction, we look forward to the presentation today, which I understand will be very interactive. So please, everyone, use your chat.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon now. We are definitely happy to be here with you today and want to extend our gratitude to the Daniel Boone Regional Library and the League of Women Voters. Today, we're going to be talking about United Way's vision for equity, our community norms that we established at the beginning of all such meetings, and encourage you to do the same as you continue in the work to build equity. We're going to share some stories about us, and while we do that, we encourage you to reflect and share in the chat some stories about you and things that you've witnessed as it relates to what we're sharing. We'll also talk about implicit bias and privilege in everyday life and some of the experiences we've had. We'll review the difference between equity and equality. And we'll talk about some institutionalized barriers before jumping into some Q&A. But throughout this whole session, we encourage you to use the chat, ask questions as they arise for you, and also share information. as we request. And I'm just going to go ahead and drop the link to our equity challenge in the chat. So if you have not already signed up, please go ahead and do so. And hopefully that will help you acquire the tools to fight for equity and be a leader in this fight. So our equity vision is why we're here. This is why we're here at this Lunch and Learn. It's why United Way is here. It is at the core of our mission. Traditionally, we've talked about poverty and alleviating the suffering that comes with poverty. And as we've come to understand the root causes of poverty, we understand that those are inequities that are built in to our systems through structural racism. And we know that if inequities did not exist, we wouldn't have poverty. And so that is how we come to our work.
So United Way's equity vision reads as follows, and you can follow it on your screen. We recognize structural racism and other forms of oppression have contributed to persistent disparities, which United Way seeks to dismantle. Our United Way network strives to engage community members, especially those whose voices have traditionally been marginalized. We work with residents and public and private partners to co-create solutions that ensure everyone has the resources, support, opportunities, and networks they need to thrive. We commit to leveraging all of our assets, convening strategic investments, awareness building, and advocacy to create more equitable communities. Equity is the intentional inclusion of everyone in society. And equity is achieved when systemic, institutional, and historical barriers based on race, gender, sexual orientation, and other identities are dismantled and no longer predict socioeconomic, education, and health outcomes. That is why we're here today, to empower you, as Rachel said already, to be leaders in this fight for equity.
And we want to start by setting some community norms. And we have found in our work that it's always helpful to start with establishing some kind of ground rules or norms for going forward in this work, because it can be very sensitive and triggering and uncomfortable. And so first, we ask that you be present, be fully here, even when there are distractions, even when there's discomfort. Come back to being present and participate actively. We're going to ask you to share your experiences in the chat, and please do that. Make this engaging and interactive so that we can learn together.
The next thing we ask is that you extend grace. Rachel said that this is a sensitive topic. There's often a tendency to be defensive, feel defensive, or to take things, personally. We ask that you extend grace to each other. We should all be almost subject matter experts on that, with the grace that we have to extend during technology faux pas, since we've moved everything to a virtual setting.
We also ask you to listen deeply and focus on opportunities for understanding. This is something I always perpetually need to work on, because it's so easy to hear what somebody says and suddenly get an idea in my head that I want to share. And all of a sudden I'm not listening, but I'm waiting to speak. So let's not do that. Let's practice really listening deeply so that we can find those opportunities for understanding.
Next, we ask you to challenge your own prejudices and stereotypes. And I want to first state, acknowledging that you have prejudices or stereotypes doesn't make you a racist person. We all have them, but if we don't recognize them, acknowledge them, it becomes really difficult to move past them. So when you feel those moments of dissonance, really stop and ask yourself, where is it coming from?
When we share, we want to share from our own perspective. We don't want to sit here and tell other people's story. We want to tell our own story. So in thinking about that, make sure you make I statements when you're sharing. And along those same lines, what stays here, or what happens here, what's shared here, stays here to an extent. We want you to be able to take what you learn here and share it with others. We do not want you to share stories of others in an identifiable way. So please keep in mind that it is up to all of us to make this a safe space for sharing.
Also, be willing to be uncomfortable. We've said it a few times already. There will be some things that are said that you'll just want to recoil from. I'm just asking you to lean into that discomfort so we can move past it. Also, be self aware and don't judge anyone.
I hear all the time, but I didn't mean anything by it. And we know that if you say something or do something, or if I say something or does something, or Latoya does or says something that's offensive, I'm going to assume that you did not intend to be offensive. I'm going to trust your intent in being here today is because you want to advance equity. But with that, we also have to take responsibility when our impact is not what we intend for it to be. And so Latoya and I often call each other out when, some implicit bias pops up. Well, that's your privilege. Well, that's because that's your perspective. And we trust one another to have that vulnerability and then to come back and say, that wasn't my intent. And I can learn from this experience so that I don't accidentally hurt somebody again.
Next, we'll say, please do your best to keep your comments short and concise. We would love to have an opportunity to hear from each of you. Try your best not to monopolize the conversation.
I'm sorry, I was catching up on the chat thread and wanted to call out one of the things that's highlighted in there, that the chat will not be recorded. It will not be part of the recording that's on YouTube. So your confidence will be kept there. And then also, we want to really engage in dialogue. This isn't about being right or being wrong. This is about sharing our own stories and our own perspectives and listening for genuine understanding. And we don't have to agree because it's our own experiences.
And the last, but certainly not the least, is probably one of the more important items on the list, is just come into this expecting and accepting the fact that as much as we would love for there to be closure, once this lunch and learn is over, we will not have any. This has been an issue in this country for hundreds of years. And so a 1 hour discussion about it is not going to change it. It'll take more than my lifetime to change it, but we're here to start making those steps and taking those strides, learning what we can do to make the world a better place for everyone that's in it. And with that, I guess we're going to go ahead and get into it.
I want to thank Barbara for the lovely, lovely introduction. And we just wanted to share a little bit more with you about who we are.
Okay, so this is going to sound really random, but if you work with me, you know that I randomly remind people in our office that I'm Black. So I'm going to start with that. Fun fact, guys, I am Black. I am an American descendant of slaves. I also have indigenous ancestry through the Choctaw Nation. I'm a single mother of 4 sons. I am an inclusive marketing and communications professional. I'm also heterosexual. I am an avid mental health advocate. And although I do live here in Missouri, I am a true Southern girl to my heart, and I am from Florida.
I often say that because of my upbringing, I have an inner Black child. But the reality is I walk around in this world with white privilege, and there's no getting around that. I'm Jewish, but non-practicing. I am a practicing social worker, macro level. I'm also a mental health advocate. And then I have some parts of my identity that I don't really have to think about too much. And that's my privilege, but I'm heterosexual, I'm able-bodied, and I am a cisgen female woman living in the body that I was born with and feeling comfortable in that body with my gender and sex being aligned. Not everybody has those privileges as part of their identity. And I thought it would be important to call that out today because our identities so much make up part of who we are, right? And so we wanted to ask you to now, if you will type in the chat some of the things that make up your identity, some pieces that you feel are important, whether it's your ethnicity, your political views, your ability level, neurodiversity. There's all kinds of things that make up our identities. And we'd like to get a sense of all the different people who are here with us today and how they identify. And make sure when you're chatting, you're doing to all panelists and attendees, because we won't have a chance to call out all of what's in the chat.
And while you guys are thinking about it, I'll call it a couple of things that people that work with me know. I absolutely love sports. It's a part of my identity. I am from Florida. Being from Florida, I had to pick sides early. You know, you have Florida State, University of Florida, University of Miami. I'm a Florida State fan, which everyone in my office knows as well. I often give sports commentaries after all of the games, and no one cares about it other than my boss and and my coworker David. None of the rest of them care. So they're just little things that make you who you are. Wow, family of 9. That had to be exciting.
One of the reasons I bring up being Jewish but non-practicing, one of the ways that plays out kind of in my daily interactions is this thing with my name. I get called other names that are typical Jewish names all the time. Rebecca and Sarah being the most common. And I think it's because I look like what could be a Rebecca or a Sarah if you look at me and think the Jewish girl, right? And I have what is that stereotypical Jewish look. And so that's one of the ways that comes out and how it shapes kind of the experiences we have and how other people perceive us and interact with us. So we have someone in the chat saying that their identity includes being white and married, being a woman, a sports enthusiast, having a bachelor's and master's education, having spent 8 years as a single mother with 2 children, Christian and retired.
We also have someone stating that they're a mother. Uh-oh, it went away. It's gone.
First gen college graduate, hockey fan, pizza lover, political junkie, data nerd, advocate, anxiety haver. I relate.
Really?
Ooh, and this is going to be on YouTube later.
It is. How about that? We also have a female, Northern European heritage, cisgender, heterosexual, mother of 1 daughter, and retired.
I see grateful as someone's identity.
That's amazing.
And as someone who leans a lot on gratitude, I can definitely relate to that. White, female, married, lesbian, politically progressive, but not very active, introvert, educated, and grateful.
All right, a multicultural woman of color, hidden disability, raised by a single white cis mother, Catholic without Kool-Aid, mother of teen boys, cisgender, master of arts in rehab counseling, mental health advocate, and political wonk.
We have someone who identifies as white, able-bodied, female, heterosexual, who grew up in a small rural town in Northwest Missouri. 2 sisters, retired and loving it, although not excited that I'm also identified as elderly.
I'm working toward retirement, so I'm glad that you're loving it. That's good to know. We have a white cisgendered female who was born in the body that she's comfortable with. She's unable to have children of her own. She has anxiety, but she loves her cat. She's the first member of her family to attain a master's degree.
We have older heterosexual woman, half Jewish, half German, come from Detroit with a large family, 5 children, foster child when I was little, started the beginning of 100 foster children for that couple, and have been a foster parent myself and a mother of 2.
Fantastic. And then we also have a white woman, retired physical therapist, wife, mother, grandmother, left leaning politically, miss volunteer work at Turning Point. She misses that. She's a singer and she's Christian. I hope that what you all see is that we all come to this space with different identities, different stories, different aspects of our humanity, but at the core, we're all human, right? And so I wish that we could read all of them, but we are on the time clock. But would totally encourage you to continue to share, because everything that you all have put in there, it affects how you experience the world and how others interact with you.
So we wanted to share with you a little story.
Yes, so I want you all to put yourself in the position, just imagine with me for one moment that you are with your coworkers and you work for an organization and you want to say thank you to one of your clients for their support in the year. And so about 8 of you get together and decide you're going to go down to their office space and just say thank you. You go into the office, and when you walk in, you're greeted by this young whippersnapper coming out thinking he's going to make a sale. So he wants to know, is there anything he can help you guys with? Your supervisor tells him, oh, no, thank you so much for coming out. We're here to see your executives. They know we're on the way. Someone's coming down. So at that point, once he realizes he's not going to make a sale, he asks who you're with, where are you from, and what are you doing there? With a huge thank you sign in your hands, you explain that you just want to say thanks, you appreciate everything they've done. This young whippersnapper, as I call him, decides he wants to shake everyone's hands. You're standing in a line in a bit of a semicircle, and you are the 4th person in the line. He starts shaking hands with everyone to your right. He shakes the first person's hand, the second person. He gets to your work best friend, shakes their hand. Then when it comes to you, you put your hand out for them to shake your hand. And to your surprise, they overlook you and go down to the other end of the line and start working their way back towards you. When that happens, you look at your work best friend, you're kind of surprised, and you just ask, did you see that? Did that just happen? They say, yeah, I saw that. Eventually, he gets back to you and he shakes your hand. You're still kind of shocked. You go upstairs, you take your picture, you say thank you, you all leave and go to your next location. Once you get to the next spot, you come off the elevator, you're waiting for the next group of people to come out to say thank you, and you just ask everyone, did you all see what just happened? No one knows what you're talking about. So you have to explain to them what happened. They're still in shock. You look at your work best friend and you say, did I make that up? And then they say, no, that happened. Well, I want to let you know that that's not a pretend imagination. That person was me, and it was at a business here in Columbia, downtown. My work best friend was Rachel. She was standing to my immediate right. And in that moment of shock and disbelief, it was on 2 fronts. It was one, I don't believe the person recognized what they were doing, but totally got to me, skipped my hand and went down to the other end of the line, which bypasses any social norms. And at the same time, none of my coworkers were aware of what happened because they weren't paying attention.
And I want to ask the audience now to chime in the chat and share any experiences like that that you've maybe had or experienced or witnessed, or maybe something that you did before you knew better. And while you think on that, I'm going to share another story, because the story that LaToya just shared, that was not a unique experience, not at all, in fact. And it happened, in fact, a few weeks later when we were on a United Way site visit. Now, a United Way site visit is when United Way staff and volunteers and our board members go out to an agency that is applying for money, and we hear from their executive director, their board members, and their staff who deliver the program why we should make the investment in them. And it's volunteers that make these decisions. And one of our volunteer board members did the exact same thing that LaToya described in the young whippersnapper, except the person who was the target of this microaggression was the young woman who was going to be presenting the proposal for the program she is responsible for delivering in the community. So right before asking for money, one of the people making the decision did not shake her hand, didn't come back to her last, did the half circle, did the other half circle, and skipped over her altogether. And yeah, we have somebody in the chat who says, yes, that's happened to me. I did not extend my hand. Now, I share this experience and highlight that this happened with one of our board members specifically, because our board members are people who you would generally consider are good people, and they are, right? They dedicate a lot of time and energy and money and effort to solving the most challenging problems in our community. They're not bad people, and the person who did this is not a bad person. LaToya said that it goes against all social norms. But in fact, ignoring Black people is a social norm. And therein lies the problem. It's so normal that we don't even see it most of the time. Now, I see it because I've been doing this for a long time. I've listened to a lot of experiences from people of color, and I hear that this happens. And so I'm more likely to see it because I'm looking for those things and wondering what can I do? And now we have a story from the chat. LaToya, do you want to call that out? You're on mute still.
I didn't want to, my dog, he trips sometimes. So the story is our contributor here is married to a white man and has mixed race children. They were on vacation in the Ozarks, which if you're not from Missouri, it's a really pretty place, kind of south of Columbia. She was with her husband's family and they were at Silver Dollar City. And she was the only person that was searched, even though she only had a small clutch. Her sister-in-laws had bags and strollers, and no one else in the family noticed. She had to be the one to bring it up.
I've had almost that same experience, but at Walmart. And the only time I've ever had a ticket checked is when I was at Walmart with a Black man. Any other time I've been at Walmart, the people at the exit do not verify that I have in fact purchased what is in my cart. We have another story from our audience. Says, we were at some function and others often talk with my husband about his work, but they never ask me about my work.
Someone else, they've had a customer turn down technical help from them, asking if there was someone male or perhaps younger that could help, assuming that because she's a female, middle-aged, she couldn't possibly know about technology.
And so this is where we start to really see the interplay of our identities and how that shapes how people perceive and interact with us, all based on implicit bias. All of these messages that we get that we don't even know we get because they're so pervasive in our society. And so what do we do about it? What do you do when you see that happening to somebody that you care about? Or maybe it's a stranger. How do you interrupt that bias or that microaggression? And if I'm throwing out words that are a little bit advanced and you're like, whoa, what's this microaggression stuff? that is covered in the Equity Challenge. So again, I encourage you to sign up for the Equity Challenge, and we will provide a link in the chat and again at the end on the last slide. But Latoya, do you want to share some of the steps for interrupting
Sure.
behavior?
So number one, and this is the most important, because if you don't get this, you really can't go to the next steps. So one, you have to be aware. You have to pay attention, and you have to recognize that it's happening and who is being impacted by it. In the story that I presented before, most of my coworkers were not aware that it happened. So the next step, once you're aware, you have to have a willingness to speak up. And it can be as easy as asking a question if someone makes a joke that is not really, funny. Like, so why is that funny? When someone tells a racist joke, or it's a joke that, is biased. Or it can be as simple as stating, okay, well, this is awkward. If someone starts to stereotype a group of people, or you are just uncomfortable with the direction that a conversation is going. The next thing that you can do is to ask the person who is the target of the microaggression what would be helpful. It really it shouldn't be up to the Black, Indigenous, person of color to point out every time things like this happen. But, we may not want you to make a scene at our expense either. So sometimes it is perfectly okay to say, hey, I saw that happen. Is there anything that I can do? Or how would you like for me to address it? Sometimes it recognizes, power differentials, because sometimes the person making that aggression is someone that is in a role over you hierarchically. So maybe you're not comfortable saying something, but you need someone else who has a little bit more professional power than you do to address it. So just make sure that you ask, permission first. I want to share an example of what this looks like in real life. So a couple of years ago, I was in St. Louis at the mall. Don't judge me. I go to the mall every time I'm in St. Louis. And I was in Dillard's. I always park outside of Dillard's when I'm at the mall in St. Louis. And I had gone on a bit of a shopping frenzy, picked up some dresses and some sunglasses and some earrings. And I was looking for someone to check me out. And no one would check me out. So eventually I walked over to the jewelry counter, and there was a lady there. And so I said, excuse me, can you check me out? She said she couldn't help me. And so I start looking for someone else, and she's like, just ignoring me at this point. I stood there for about 10 minutes. I'm looking for anyone else. And then the 16-year-old white girl with her mother and her grandmother walks up with a scarf. And I'll never forget the scarf. It was white and pink. She walks up with the scarf, and as soon as she gets to me, the lady who refused to help me immediately says to her, oh, come on over here, I can help you. And I was stunned because I had been asking for help. And her mother looked at her and said, oh no, she was here first. The lady says, no, she wasn't. And she said, yes, she was. She was waiting, and I'm horrified. You go first. And so then the lady checked me out. So one, she was aware of what happened. Now, she didn't know how long I had been there, but she knew I was there before she got there. And she was willing to say something and did what she felt like was appropriate given the situation and the circumstances that we found ourselves in.
And sometimes it might not be appropriate to address a situation publicly. In the workplace, sometimes that might not be the best approach, like Latoya was saying. What is never the right approach is to get on your high horse of self-righteousness and point out somebody else's racist behavior without at all acknowledging the person who is the target of that behavior and how they feel. That misses the point. And that approach is also likely to shut down any dialogue with the person whose behavior you're trying to address. The goal is not to have people be defensive, but to have all of us understand how these things play out in our everyday life. And what we like to say is like, sometimes you need somebody to hold a mirror up to you so you can see when you're doing that yourself. And so that's what we want to do. We have someone from the audience sharing that they slipped up in the past and were gently corrected in the language when they said that a person of color who gave a presentation was really articulate. Yeah. The implication is that I didn't expect her to be articulate. Not my intent, but that was the impact. I've found better ways to praise a speaker. And so if that doesn't sound like a familiar story to you, this is something that Black people and people of color often encounter when they don't meet another person's expectation, that they're uneducated, that they don't speak with proper grammar, and that it's surprising. You're so articulate. It is meant to be a compliment, but it comes with all that baggage that actually makes it an insult. But if you don't know that, then it's like, why? What did I do wrong? I intended to give a compliment. And that's where I trust your intent, but I need you to take responsibility for your impact comes in. And that's the kind of behavior that we need to model, that all of us need to model as we go forward and advance this work. And I would encourage, if anyone else has stories that relate to this, to share those in the chat, either stories when you faced microaggressions or stereotypes or bias, or when you've been corrected or had a chance to interrupt a microaggression yourself. Someone says, I remember in college I had a phone interview, and when I came in for the face-to-face with the manager, stated she didn't realize I was Black.
Yeah, I can.
Implying that had I known, I wouldn't have called you in.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. I can totally relate. I'll just leave that there.
I'm just keeping an eye on the chat to see if there are any other ideas that are coming out, experiences that are being shared. And while we do that, I'm going to also jump on to our next slide, which is really trying to get at the difference between equity and equality, because a lot of us have been raised with this idea that we're all equal. And so everything should just be equal and we should treat everybody equally. And the challenge is that it doesn't really take into account the privileges earned and unearned that we have. So in this lovely little graphic, which you may have seen versions of it in the past, this has been reworked. And so I'll just go over the legend really quickly. The size of each human is relative to the earned and unearned advantages and disadvantages they face in life. So an unearned advantage, for example, is being born into wealth, being born white, being born with a value of education upheld in your family. You know, if everyone in your family's gone to college and there's an expectation that you will too, that's an unearned advantage. Now you earn the degree itself by doing the work, but the framework for getting there is in fact unearned. And how we get to all of those things that make for a successful life, that make for economic stability and good education and good health, there are barriers to those things. And a lot of those barriers come up based on those earned and unearned advantages and disadvantages that we have in life. And typically we say, well, if we're going to help, then there's just like, do it all equally. Everybody gets a stimulus check of the same amount if this is their income, higher or lower. Everybody gets that amount. Well, that's great. That's helping some people get even a higher leg up. But it's rarely going to do enough to help the person that faces the most disadvantages. And I want to go back to like, what is that fence? If you can think of things that make up institutionalized barriers, share those in the chat now. I'll share one from my perspective. Something that I see a lot is in service delivery, right? We fund health and human services to organizations who then provide services to individuals in our community. But historically, a lot of the funding for some of their programs, not United Way funding, requires a very, very high bar of proving that you are in the situation that you say you are. And this comes out of the stereotype of the welfare queen. People are just trying to get over on the system. And so we need to make it hard to access the system because we don't want people to take advantage of that. So, for example, right now, if you're unemployed due to the pandemic, to get unemployment compensation, there's all kinds of hoops you have to jump through to prove that your unemployment is in fact related to the pandemic and that you're not just a lazy, no good for nothing trying to live off of the system. And I don't know about you, but I don't know anybody that woke up and thought, yeah, I want to be in poverty. This is how I'm going to live. I want to humiliate myself on a regular basis by going around to different places and proving just how poor I am. Collecting paperwork from an employer that's fired me or shut down because of the pandemic. Someone in the audience calls out access to technology. Absolutely. If you do not have access to technology, especially during the pandemic, if your children don't have access to technology, it's going to be very hard for them to participate in school. And not just technology, but the actual infrastructure of internet connection. For our community that is out a little bit more rural and outside of Columbia a little bit, accessing the internet and having a stable connection is really a challenge. See, access to education and after school programs, yes, a lot of challenges with transportation and barriers that say children cannot ride public transportation or Uber or Lyft without an adult supervision, which, we create rules like that because we think it's for the safety of those individuals, and it is, but it also creates barriers for them to be able to participate in a lot of things. Poverty, appearance, physical disability are also brought up. And so with that, I'm just going to go ahead and transition us to our next slide. But yep, there we go. And ask, this is Mia. And I want you to think about, when you look at this image of Mia, what circumstances might she be facing? What barriers might her and her children be facing? What systemic, institutionalized barriers might Mia face if she lived in our community? What we know about Mia is that she has 2 kids. She appears to be experiencing homelessness. She appears to be of mixed race. We have someone who says access to affordable housing, transportation, and affordable childcare would all be barriers. Someone else says, I work in protective custody foster care field. The goal, once we remove children, is reunification. It happens about 65% of the time. In order to meet that goal, parents are expected to be perfect in their interactions with their kids. It's an unattainable goal and not expected of me as a parent that is not caught up in the system. And I want to add to that one more not so fun fact. If Mia lived here in Boone County, her interaction with the system would result in her losing her children to the care of the state. 11% of children locally who are in the care of the state are in the care of the state because their parents were unable to provide inadequate housing. So I ask you again, do you think any of those parents woke up and thought, I want to be poor? I want to live in inadequate housing that is not safe, not healthy, not affordable. No parent wants that for their child. And the irony, of course, is that the state doesn't have money to take care of the children either. And so by not really addressing the core issues, we get caught up in this cycle that continues to harm. Someone else says that Mia would be shamed for not being able to care for her child in a middle class way. Some shelters do not allow males into the shelter after a specific age, so some family shelters might not let them in. In fact, if they were here in Columbia, their only option to shelter as a family would be at Salvation Army, and there are only 4 rooms available for families.
Also, something that I want you all to consider is what happened that caused Mia to be in the position she's in. So all of the conversation at this point is being taken from the standpoint of she's here, right? And so what are some barriers that she's facing now? But like to Rachel's point, if we don't address the root causes, then we'll always be treating symptoms. It will never get to the actual cause. Someone stated no health insurance, bathing facilities, adequate clothing, and not a chance to play with other kids or feel safe. Someone else stated access to food or food stamps might be limited or denied because unless she's willing to search for work and work a certain number of hours a week. Someone asked the question,
We
does
have
she
someone,
have health care?
yeah,
Does
does
she
she have access to mental health care?
have
And that brings us back to another set of stereotypes, right? Is someone experiencing homelessness because they have an unaddressed mental illness? And that is the case some of the time. Someone else says they might have been a victim of domestic violence or domestic abuse. The other thing that could have happened is her lease could have expired. Her landlord could have decided, I'm not going to rent out this apartment anymore. That happened to me once. My landlord wanted to move into the apartment herself. And so I got kicked out when my lease was over. But in this town, if that happens to you and you, going back to our other story that someone shared about showing up to a job interview and the manager being surprised that the person is Black, that happens in the housing market here. People go to rent an apartment, they talk to the landlord on the phone, the apartment's available, they show up to see the apartment and it turns out they're Black, and then the apartment is no longer available. These kinds of things happen way more than we would like to believe. From systemic misogyny. So, what happens when a woman is experiencing an abuse, and how is the system set up to help her, support her, help her reach financial independence? All of those things are really not in the woman's favor. So someone says her daughter was told that she couldn't get food stamp assistance unless she has a child. So yeah, in Missouri, Medicaid is only available if you're elderly or with children. So if you are a single adult without dependents, then there's a lot of assistance that's just not available to you in any way, shape, or form.
I also want you to consider, because poverty looks totally different here in Columbia than what it looks stereotypically in other parts of the country. So here, you can have someone who is working 2 jobs, a full-time job and a part-time job, 2 part-time jobs and not getting any full-time benefits. And they make too much money to qualify for assistance, but not enough money to actually meet all of their needs, their basic needs. And so when we look at people experiencing hardships, in this case, Mia, I would just encourage everyone to remember that it's a person, that's a human being. And it's also interesting to me that no one wants to acknowledge that there's a system until they're worried that someone's taking advantage of it. Because any other time, people are like, oh, there's no systemic racism, there's no systemic oppression, there aren't systemic barriers. But then at the same time, we don't want people to take advantage of the system. So there are systems, there are disadvantages that people have that they have no control over. And then there are things that we can do, like what can we do, to help? Specifically here in Columbia, in Boone County, the wage gap between white families and Black families is incredible. I want to say for a white family, it's about $88,000 a year. For a Black family with the same education, experience, it's $41,000 a year. So there are things in place that make it more difficult for some people to experience a life that is not in some way, shape, or form predicated upon things that are outside of their control.
And it really comes down to, again, why are we here? Why are we doing this work? And it's because we don't believe that those things that are outside of a person's control, the systems that are structured to be against them, the animosity they face because of their ethnicity, all of those things should not determine a person's outcomes in life. Everyone should have access to financial stability, health, and education without the strings of identity being attached to those good outcomes or zip codes.
So in short, what Rachel is saying is we strive for a society in which people's outcomes in life are not determined by their identity, and we reject all forms of prejudice and discrimination, including those based on age, color, diverse ability, gender identity, gender expression, national origin, political affiliation, ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, and veteran status.
If anyone has any questions, this would be a great time to ask them. Just pop them in the chat or other comments. I know we did miss an earlier comment about Mia. If she had a past criminal record, that would also present a barrier in her receiving any support. And I also want to encourage everyone to sign up for the Equity Challenge if you have not already. The Equity Challenge is a 7-week email series. And each week you get one email that has something to watch, some articles to read, some references for more information if you want some book titles along that topic. And each email, we give you an opportunity to reflect. We give you an opportunity to identify ways that you personally can take action to advance equity. And we have someone asking, if they signed up last year, will there be a new 2021 version? We are working on that, yes. And we are also looking for ways to engage our participants. I have someone asking a question that I need a little bit more background on, or a little bit more context. Do we think that Medicaid expansion will make a difference? Make a difference in what is my question? It will definitely expand healthcare access. But with the Equity Challenge, we also encourage you to sign up for it with friends and with family. So even if you did the one in 2020 and you share it with some friends and invite them to sign up, you can do that and then revisit the content. I find that a lot of times we get something new when we come at it from a fresh angle. When you go back to the beginning after you've read through the 7 weeks. If you are if you've signed up and you have not received any of the emails, just email Latoya. Throwing you under the bus there, Latoya, and sharing your email in the chat. And we will get it worked out through Constant Contact. If you've ever unsubscribed from United Way emails, then that could be the issue, and you'll need to add to your safe list again.
Also use the email address that I put in there because she forgot the S. So if you email that first one, I'm not going to get it.
That's what happens when I'm typing and talking. What is United Way doing to help minorities and people historically disadvantaged get the COVID vaccine? So we have a great public health department here, actually. We work very closely with the city and the county and other funders in the community through the Como Helps. And our local public health department is very focused on mitigating against the historical disadvantages that we've seen in healthcare. And so while other communities have an astronomical difference in their COVID rates among their Black population compared to their white population, here in Columbia, we see more like a 1.5 point difference. So 8.8% of our population is African American, and about 10% of our COVID cases are within the African American community. And that is because our public health department is doing very concentrated outreach and programming to help get public health information into the hands of people who need it the most.
I also want to put a little bit of information out here before we end. I know we're rapidly approaching the hour, but if you do encounter individuals who need assistance, please refer them to 211. United Way 211. It's a resource and referral line. They will have a case manager. They can dial 211. I'll throw the link to the website in here as well. And it will help them to be able to locate some of those resources. Someone mentioned people need assistance and really don't have any way to get them, to help them see if those resources are available. Also, if you know someone who's struggling with prescription costs, we also partner with FamilyWise, which is it's not insurance, but it's a prescription discount program. And there's a website with the link, and it's absolutely free. There's nothing they need to provide us with, so that they can see if there are discounts available on any prescriptions that they may have.
All right. I just want to say thank you so much. I know we've got some other questions we couldn't get to, didn't have time to get to. Rachel and Latoya, thank you so much for sharing this information. I'm going to be signing up as soon as we get off this Zoom meeting. I did want to mention a few more programs upcoming. The League's next Lunch and Learn that we're co-hosting is on Tuesday, March 9th at noon, and that's with Columbia Police Department's Chief Jeff Jones, an update from the police department, and an opportunity to ask him questions. So please sign up for that. We also, in sort of a similar vein of today's program, there is a program, a human library program that we are co-sponsoring with the Services for Independent Living, where people volunteer to be books based on a certain aspect of their identity, and then people can be readers and have conversations via Zoom with those books. So please check that out. Other League co-sponsored events, our second part of a Minority Youth and Equities and Justice Forum is coming up on Wednesday, February 17th, and I'm posting that in the chat if you could sign up for that. And then we have 2 election forums in March. March 16th at 7, we'll be doing an election forum on Columbia City Council candidates, and then on March 23rd, that will be Columbia School Board and Missouri's 45th District House seat. So there are a number of important events coming up. Today's program was recorded. It will be posted on the League's website, their YouTube channel, as well as the library. So thank you all so very much for attending. And thank you again to Latoya and Rachel. We really, really appreciate this information.
Thank you, guys. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.